Hi there, Thor owners. Today in your 2014 Thor Windsport, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar. And this is what your sway bar is going to look like when it's installed. It's going to work with your factory sway bar, which is located just on the other side of your axle. So you're going to have double the amount of anti-sway on your vehicle. The auxiliary sway bar that we've added here is a thicker diameter bar, so it's going to be even stronger than the factory bar that's located on the other side. So what this means for you is that over the life of your RV, you're going to experience less sway. So you won't have so much rocking back and forth. This is nice if you're caught in heavy crosswinds where it may cause it to sway, or you hit any uneven pavement that causes it to sway. It's going to make it more comfortable inside for your passengers because they're not going to experience so much sway back and forth. And it's going to be a lot easier on you driving the vehicle because you're not going to be fighting to maintain a straight line down the road as much. So ultimately, this means you're going to have more energy when you get to your destination, so you can enjoy doing the things that you like to do with your family and friends rather than wanting to take a nap. It's designed to work with your motorhome's chassis. It's a no-drill installation. It simply bolts in place. And it has a solid steel construction that's going to last the life of your RV. So once you make this upgrade, you're going to be getting the benefits forever, and you never have to touch it again. It's a pretty straightforward installation. You just have to remove and add a few bolts. You can do it right in your driveway. Let's go over it now. We'll begin our installation by removing the cross-member bolts just behind our rear axle. We're on the driver's side here. We're looking in through the wheel well, and you can see the two bolts there. Now, if you're just going to run out to your RV and look, you probably won't see those bolts because your leaf spring normally runs directly in front of them, preventing you from getting those bolts out. You can use your leveling jacks to raise up the vehicle. You can see here I've got it to where the axle's off the ground. I'm rotating the wheel. And that will drop the leaf spring down, giving us the clearance we need to access those bolts. Whenever using your leveling jacks to work on your vehicle, you should always place jack stands underneath the frame because you don't want to trust those hydraulic components. We'll remove both these bolts using a 21mm socket. We can now take our hanger brackets. They look like this. They have an L shape to them, and they're going to sit flat up against the bottom of the frame. So we're just going to slide it up, lining up the holes in the bracket with the holes in our frame. And then we're just going to reinstall our factory bolts, clamping our bracket in place. Your nuts on the back side will have a flange on them. These are the factory ones. We're just going to reuse those as well. That little flange helps prevent the nut from spinning, so you don't need to hold it with a wrench in most cases. Sometimes the flange does bend, requiring you to use a wrench. We can now tighten down our bolts. And then we can torque them to the specifications found in our instructions. We'll then repeat this same process over on the other side. We'll have to remove our shock bolts now, so you may want to use some penetrant to make it easier. We'll be using an 1.5" socket or wrench to remove these. And we're taking these loose just here on the bottom so we can access the hole here that's at the bottom where we'll be mounting our sway bar. You'll want to save your bolt because we're going to be reusing it. And you can use the nut if you want to help you tap the bolt out of there because it's not uncommon for it to get rusted and be tight in there as well. Once you've got this side out, we're going to need to get the other side out as well because we need to again access this hole here at the bottom. We can now prepare our sway bar for installation. You'll receive some lubricant that comes in your kit. We're going to apply this to the inside of our bushings. We're just going to slide those out there. You may want to wear gloves when using this. Some people do get irritations on their skin from it. Others are fine, so if you just want to be cautious, you can put those on. And we're just going to coat the inside of it all the way around. And then once the inside is fully coated, I like to take the excess that's on my finger and just wipe it off on the outside of the bushing. That can just help keep down on any squeaks that can occur. Our bushing will then slide over our axle end. It is split, so just open it up. It'll slide over in roughly this position. We can adjust it later. And then we'll slide our top back on. Now you don't have to put the top on just yet if you don't want either, because it does fall off fairly easily as well. We're going to do the same thing with our other bushing over here on the other side. We'll be using the small hex head and button head bolts in our kit to attach our sway bar bushing brackets there. Each one of these is going to get a flat washer placed on it first. And we're just going to prepare one side first. So you'll have a button head on one side as well as a hex head. The hex head is for the more easily accessible hole. We'll be placing the hex head bolts from the top down through the upper hole, and the button head bolt from top down through the lower hole. We'll have these prepared on both sides, and then we can grab our sway bar. You'll also want to make sure you have the nuts and the split washers, because we'll need those when we're securing it. Now the sway bar is pretty heavy, so we're going to be lifting it up, and you'll want to place a split washer on followed by a locking nut. But since it is so heavy, I'm just going to lift it up and start with a nut, and then I'll place my washers on afterwards after it's holding itself up. So now we got all the nuts started, it's a little bit easier to work with. So we'll just, one at a time, take the nut off, slide our washer on, and you can see why it is cut there. So that way it'll clear our bushing shackle. And we're just going to repeat that for the remaining three. Now with all of our washers and everything in place, we can go back and tighten down our hardware. We'll be using a 15mm socket for our nuts and a 6mm Allen for the button head bolt. We'll be doing that on both sides. And then we can go back and torque those to the specifications found in our instructions. We're not going to put our shocks back on because you can see when our sway bar is in position, it's going to prevent us from being able to access the bolts. Also, just push your shock back up. Put it back in position, lining it up with the holes. And then slide your bolt through. We're just re-securing it with the factory hardware that we removed, so don't forget any of the washers or nuts. We're going to do the other side as well. And then we'll re-secure the shock bolt. We'll now hang our shackles. We're going to be hanging them from the lower hole on our frame bracket. Then we're going to take the large long bolts that come in our kit and go from the outside towards the inside through the bracket and our hanger here. And then we are going to secure it on the other side with a nylon locking nut. Now before we put our sway bar attached into the hanger there, we do want the suspension to be loaded again. So if you've got it up on your leveling jacks, you want to take your jack stands out and lower it back down. We've got ours on a drive up lift, so our suspension is currently loaded, so we're just going to turn it up into position until it sits between our holes here in our hanger, and then we'll just slide our bolt on through. Now it's not uncommon for it to be a little bit difficult for everything to line up properly when you're doing this. Sometimes you do have to do a little bit of prying to get it all to come together. And then we'll secure the other side with a nylon locking nut. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar on our 2014 Thor Windsport.